Hello, and welcome to the final part of the Lorcana Set 2 card review of Rise of the Floodborns. Steel is left, and as always, I am your host, Nicholas Heel, and let's see what the last cards of the Floodborn set have to offer. Beast, Forbidding Recluse, 4/3/4/1. When you play this character, you may deal 1 damage to chosen character. Oh, well, I like this card more than the Hans 4 Steel from set 1, but I don't like that card that much. Just 1 damage. It's situationally relevant, but it's just not enough. Beast, Self-Risk Protector, 6/2/8/1. Whenever one of your other characters would be dealt damage, put that many damage counters on this character instead. This card can be interesting. It does, in the Amber Steel matchup, kind of mitigate tank, at least a little bit, because you just put all the damage on Beast, which is interesting. It might be relevant. It depends on if Amber Steel is still one of the meta contenders and how popular the mirror is, and depending on the new set, how that affects the deck list, how often the board stalls happen, because tank is usually one of the better cards in the game, and in that deck, it's one of the better cards in the mirror as well. So, just remains to be seen. Card is interesting. Beast, Tragic Hero, 5/3/5/2. Shift 3. At the start of your turn, if this character has no damage, draw a card. Otherwise, he gets +4. This card's interesting because you can kind of protect the queen with this, but if there's ever a damage put on there, and if you don't attack with it, the damage is largely going to come from other steel cards. So in certain matchups, it'll pretty much just be a guaranteed draw, but you get punished for interacting with this game piece. So I'm not sure how powerful that would be, but it definitely is something to consider. And I'll definitely be trying it out at some point. Benja, Guardian of the Dragon Gem, 3/2/3/2. When you play this item, you may banish chosen item. This is just the better beast. It's cheaper, has the same amount of lore. It's not a 4/4, but being cheaper is really good for situational cards like this. And like Beast, it's a land. I'm talking about Beast from set 1. Great. I can't remember which one it is. It's the steel one. Jeep Bogo, Respected Officer, 4/2/4/2. Whenever you play a Floodborn character, deal 1 damage to each opposing characters. So now if there are a bunch of cheap Floodborn characters, this card would be good. But as stand, it's not inkable. So it is a build around me, but I don't think there are enough Floodborn cards to actually warrant playing Floodborn synergies right now. Cinderella, Knight in Training, 2/2/2/1. When you play this card, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. This is like Simba 1 from set 1, but differently, there are Shift Cinderellas in this set. So cards like this get a little better than the Simba, which only real utility was to be a 1-mana loot. But we have the Shift Cinderella right here. Cinderella Stat-Hearted, 7/5/5/3. Shift 5, resist +2. Whenever you play a song, you may challenge ready characters this turn. This card's actually really good. Again, Cinderella 2 gets a lot better when you have something like this to shift into. And it's very hard to deal with this card because it requires an attack of 7 at least. And even dealing with this card, you have to deal with it immediately. Otherwise, they can gain a lot of value. If you say they play this card and you try to develop behind it by playing a few cards, they can just play a song and one of those cards you developed is just gone. And you might not even get damage on the Cinderella because of resist 2. So all in all, pretty solid boss. Donald Duck, Deep Sea Diver, 5/6/5/1. I think this is just worse than the 5/5/5/2s, but who knows. Eli LaBeouf, Big Daddy, 4/2/5/2. Yeah, just another vanilla card, not relevant. Goofy, Knife for a Day, 9/10/10/4. If you need a curve ender, this is a curve ender, right? It's pretty big. I don't know if it's the biggest character in the game, but definitely up there. And it's a 4 lore. The biggest issue is that when you're into this territory of the 9 range, you have to have cards that are good against Maleficent 9, because the curve enders are only really good in control matchups, because against more aggressive decks, you should either have a commanding board state or have lost already. So, like, this card, while it may seem to be good in control because it's a pile of stats and it's 4 lore, it just gets dealt with very easily by them. And having your 9 mana play get dealt with by like a 5 ink card is not a good it's not a good exchange. Hercules, Divine Hero, 6/6/3/2, shift 4, resist 2. The biggest issue with this card is that its defense is a little too low for what it does, and what it does is attack. And on the curve, when you play this card as an attacker, you really need to generate enough tempo to warrant the fact that if they deal with this card, you're losing an additional card because it's shift. And if you don't shift it, it's not that impressive because then it's face up and your opponent can play around it. Hercules, Hero in Training, 2/2/3/1, playable. It's a 2/3. Notably in Steel, it was missing solid curve plays. It's like not solid as in good, solid as in consistent. Because there is that 2-drop Eric with Challenger 2 that people play. I don't really like it, but mainly because it's not very consistent. Because it's face up, so your opponent can play around it. But this card is fine. It remains to be seen if 2 ink 2/3s are playable. In set 1, they were fringe playable because certain decks would just collapse under a vanilla curve. But since there are a lot more powerful cards being played, I don't know whether or not 2 ink 2/3s are where you want to be for your 2-drop. Yafa! Dreadnought. 4/3/4/1, shift 2. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, you may draw a card. This card's interesting. I'm mainly interested in the Floodborn part of this because it's a cheap Floodborn you can play if you shift into it. And if you get a value trade, you do get to draw a card. And if it's just a trade, you also get to draw a card. So this card's fine. It's not very powerful. It's solid. Really need like a Jafar 1/3 though. And then this card would be much better. Jafar, Royal Vizier, 2/3/2/1. During your turn, this character gains evasive. This card is just a color shifted Cruella. I already talked about Cruella, but if you didn't miss it, basically I think the format will be 1/3 dominated. So having a 3/2 to challenge those 1/3s is nice. You can just save like a few lore over the course of the game by just playing a 3/2 on turn 2, which isn't nothing. And it's also a shiftable for your shift Jafar if you're playing both of them. Kronk, Junior Chipmunk, 6/4/5/2, resist 1. During your turn, whenever the character banishes another character in a chosen challenge, you may deal 2 to chosen character. It's like a fixed Tinkerbell. Like Big Tink from set 1. Which, I mean, even just playing a Tink was fine. And having more, even though this card is way worse than Tink, just having more of that effect can't be a bad thing. Though it remains to be seen if you can afford to pay 6 ink for this. Lawrence, Jealous Manservant, 3/04. Well, this character has no damage. It gets +4. This is basically Zeus, except instead of having Rush, you just have to play it, which isn't that bad. Mainly because unlike Zeus, if your opponent does not want you to take a value trade with this card, then you can lure it, and since it doesn't have any damage on it, it's still a 4/4, which I think is very powerful. I don't know, however, if it will be that powerful, because again, in the Amber Steel matchup, tinks are flying around everywhere, and this card gets tinked so hard. Li Shang, archery instructor, 5/3/6/2. Whenever this character quests, your characters gain evasive this turn. Yeah, it's just not the right stats. It's a little underwhelming. In order for this to be constructed playable, there would have to be multiple evasive decks. And right now, evasive is just like a fringe strategy, a fringe part of a couple of different archetypes. So I don't think this card will be anywhere near playable. Magic Broom Industrial Model, 3/2/3/1. When you play this character, chosen character gains resistance until the start of your next turn. Unfortunately, this is not as good as the other Broom, because the other Broom, you weren't playing it for its effect. You're playing it because it could create a board state in which you would be able to win through decking. But the reason I don't like the Broom package in set 1 is because if your opponent is ahead of you when you're trying to Broom, they'll just win the game before your Brooms will take over. But this also being a different Broom might mean that, there might be a Broom deck at some point in the future. We just need more Brooms to make the starter deck Mickey good. But right now there's just not enough Brooms to make that card very powerful. It's just a cute synergy tool. Namari, Morning Miss, 4 uninkable, 2/4 bodyguard. This character can challenge ready characters with 1 lore. This card's really good. There's a lot of ways in this set to increase attack. So if you can this card usually should read, it's just 2 cards, and it has bodyguard. So worst case scenario, you can play it. Sometimes you might only get 1, but you'll get additional value out of the bodyguard if you built your deck correctly. So it's just this card's really interesting because it's modular in that when you want a bodyguard to protect an important piece, you can use it. But if you don't, you can always just leave it there since it's only 1 lore. So not luring with it isn't that bad. And then when your opponent plays something that you want to interact with, then you can make the decision to interact with. The only downside to this card is it is uninkable, but it is quite strong, and I will be trying a couple in whatever steel decks I play just to get a feel of it, because it's powerful. Pacha, Village Leader, 6/4/8/2. Another vanilla. Notably, at the 6th slot for vanillas, there isn't that much competition, but 4/8, it's the same stats as Stitch, Carefree Surfer, which is fine. A 4/8 in the Amber Steel mirror is basically unkillable. So maybe, but the downside is that this is just a 4/8 versus the upside of Stitch, Carefree Surfer, which is draw 2 cards. So if it remains to be seen whether or not the vanilla can do enough to warrant the inclusion. My opinion is that it probably won't, but it's something to think about when you look at curve. If you're missing a 6-drop in your steel deck, you can do a lot worse than this. You could probably do a lot better too, but nothing really comes to mind right now. Prince Naveen, Penniless Royal, 3/4/3/1. It's just a 4/3 for 3. They're fringe playable. It's just it's weird that the 3. I'm just gonna reiterate again. It's just weird that the 3/4 is a 3 attack 4 defense card is just better than the 4 attack 3 defense cards. Queen of Hearts, Capricious Monarch, 7/5/6/1. Whenever an opposing character is banished, you may ready this character. If it had 2 lore, this card would be much better. I mean, obviously, but at 1 lore, it's not a quick enough threat. The upside of this card is that you gain maybe 3 lore at most, 4 if the board state is perfect. And oftentimes you'll be gaining 1 or 2 with this card. Just not what you want out of a 7-drop, I don't think. Probably cool, good and limited, though. Robin Hood, capable fighter, 2 uninkable, 1/3/1. Tap, deal 1 damage to chosen character. This card combos with Cheshire 8 to create a unstoppable killing machine. But the downside is that they have to interact with a 1/3, which isn't that hard. I will say that this card is probably very good and limited. The Huntsman, Reluctant Enforcer, 2/1/1/2. Whenever this character quests, you may draw a card, then choose and discard a card. That effect is good. The 2 lore is good. The stats are not. It just gets eaten up by a Tink. And, well, not every deck is going to be playing Tink. It's just, you're better off literally playing any other 2-drop, I think, than the 1/1s. Just because a 1/1 doesn't really generate that much value by itself. And looting, while good, is not that impactful. It's good. It's just the Prince never gives up. 3/1/3 bodyguard. Resist 1. It's a 2 lore. Yeah, this card's fine. It's very hard to deal with. Needs a 4 power attacker to deal with. It's just another bodyguard, so you can go up the bodyguard chain, which is very, very important if you're playing cards like Lilo 1 or Maleficent 1. Even like cards like Pinocchio 2, just being able to go up the bodyguard chain. So in the case of Lilo Amber Steel, you go Lilo 1 into Simba 2 bodyguard into Prince 3 bodyguard, and that Lilo is super protected. There's like no way that they're getting to it, which is powerful. And this card is just very annoying. It's basically a 1/4, but sometimes it'll just be like a 1/5 or like a 1/6. And if they don't deal with it immediately, you get to gain a few lore, which is nice. This card's probably never attacking, though. So if you want an attacking bodyguard, don't look at this card. But this card is very solid. Tiana, Celebrating Princess, 4 uninkable, 1/4/2, resist 2. While this character is exerted and you have no cards in hand, your opponents can't play actions. So this card's interesting. It's a stacks piece. And if you don't know what a stacks is, it's basically a deck that's designed to make your opponent's life miserable. And when this card is active, your opponent's life is miserable because they have to deal with it before they can play actions. Eventually, I feel like this game will have a critical mass of these types of cards to make a strategy like a strategy like stacks in Magic the Gathering historically to be viable. But right now, there's just not enough. But this is like the first step to making a deck like that exist. Tiana, Diligent Waitress, 1/1/3/1. It's a 1/3. In another color. Who knew? Again, 1/3s seem good, especially if you have additional ways to utilize the warm body. Charge. 2 action. Chosen character gains Challenger 2 and Resist 2 this turn. It's limited fodder. Probably good and limited. I wouldn't play it in Constructed. Let the Storm Rage On. 3 uninkable. Action Song. Deal 2 damage to chosen character. Draw a card. Depending on the sizing, this card could be really good. If there's a lot of 2 defense characters, then this card's value just skyrockets because being able to interact with your opponent, even if it's trading down and drawing a card, is very powerful. Incidental card draw is always a good thing, and being able to remove a game piece while drawing a card is usually good enough to not win the game, but make sure that you have enough resources to get to the game to an advantageous board state to win the game. Pick a fight. Wreck-It Ralph. 2 uninkable. Chosen character can challenge ready characters this turn. Yeah, this card's not good. If it was inkable, I would say it's good and limited, but it's not. So just don't play it. Strength of a Raising Fire. 3 song. Deal damage to chosen character equal to the number of characters you have in play. So a card like this, if there were better ways to generate multiple characters with one card, this card would obviously get better. But without that, this card kind of kind of isn't really playable. Because when you think about a game, and it's very hard to not have a lot of characters in play in a game where you're losing. Because if you have a lot of characters in play, it generally means you've done something like played a Rockstar Stitch and started drawing cards. So you've already snowballed the game state to a position where you are advantaged. And this card, well, it's good when you have a bunch of card capital and play just a bunch of characters. But if you don't, this card does literally nothing but ink. And that's not what you want your songs to be. You want your songs to be consistent. Because if a song is inconsistent, then when you see it off of an aerial, you don't know what to do with it. Do you take it on the hopes that it will be good? Or do you take the other card that's consistently good? So it is a song, so it's an inkable song. It's definitely better than Hakuna Matata, but it still doesn't do enough in my mind. Last cannon, 1 item. 1 ink, banish this item. Chosen character gets Challenger 3 this turn. This card is bad. It's just Challenger 3 is okay, but like it's gonna be at most the ceiling on this card is just a 1-for-1. You trade this card in a lore to deal with one of your opponent's characters, put some damage on your character. The floor on this card is a 2-for-1, where you have to give up the character you gave Challenger to and that card just to get rid of it. In that exchange, I don't think is good, and it can often cost you the game because you're going to be down on resources. Mouse Armor, 2 uninkable. Chosen character gets resist run this turn until the start of your next turn. Yeah, this card is not very good. Not even in limited. If it was inkable, maybe limited. But since it's not inkable, it's just steer clear. Weight set, 3 item. Whenever you play a character with 4 attack or more, you may pay 1 to draw a card. In limited, you can often design your deck through the draft process. Or in sealed deck, you might just get enough cards to make this card playable. I don't really know how many cards you need to trigger this in order to make them be played. The math is a lot different in the game than other games. I would say that like out of a 40 card deck, you would probably need, I want to say 5 at minimum, because you can ink this if you're not going to get advantage out of it. But you want the more the better, as long as your curve is fine. There'll be some decks where this card will be the best card in your deck, and there'll be other decks where this card is actually unplayable. But it is very interesting to think about. I don't think it's constructed playable, but I can see it being playable and limited. And with that, we are done with the set review. So thanks for watching.